so grateful to the New York Immigration Coalition, all their organizing for their member conference. It's been amazing to witness. The press conference they just had was incredible. We are so supportive of everything they're doing, and we're so excited to be partnering with them today as part of our package. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, Albert Fox-Kahn, who is the driving force behind everything that's going to be happening today. So Albert, take it away.
Thank you, David. Thank you to all the coalition members, the elected officials, the allies who came out today to say that New York has been wasting billions of dollars on surveillance technology that puts New Yorkers at risk, that puts New Yorkers in jail wrongfully, that promotes bias, and it's time to put an end to these Big Brother antics. It's time to ban Big Brother and create a surveillance sanctuary state here in New York. To make clear that we do not have a place in New York for things like DNA phenotyping, which uses people's DNA to create racist caricatures that are then used to arrest people and put them in jail. It's time to ban geofence warrants, which are used to identify thousands of people, to take your cell phone data, your Google data, and turn it into a policing tool. It's time to ban police purchases of our data and to make sure that the Fourth Amendment is actually worth something again and actually still is a rule of law. But above all, it is time to reverse the broken and discredited mindset that lets the police write the rules on surveillance and lets them decide how we police our communities. It's our turn. It's the people's turn to set the rules for our surveillance agenda. It's time to ban these technologies, and it's time to create the nation's first surveillance sanctuary state. So with that, I'd like to thank again all of our colleagues for coming out and thank those who are committed to pushing these bills and making this first ever surveillance legislation package a reality and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Albert. And thank you so much to all of our partners and all the partners in the legislature who are here today. I'm going to start up next by introducing two of them. Our new Senator, Kristen Gonzalez, and our long-standing ally. The two of them have worked hard to put together legislation that updates our personal privacy protection law in New York. There is a bill, there's already law that has minimal protections for New Yorkers' information, but has not been updated substantially since it was enacted in 1984. And I'm going to give the floor to Senator Gonzalez and Assemblymember Epstein to talk about how they're planning to update it.
Woo! Woo! Everyone, how are you feeling today? Good? Hi. My name is Kristen Gonzalez, and I represent State Senate District 59 in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. Let's give all the And I'm so proud to be here on what is day 2 of session for me as a new elected and the new chair of the Internet and Technology Committee in the Senate. It is with incredible just admiration for this coalition, for the work that they have done, to also join us in launching my first bill, which is the Privacy Protection Modernization Act, which is an essential bill that will close a loophole that has existed for years. Currently, our law enforcement can request data about us from any state agency, but they can do so without a warrant. And at a time where we're seeing our rights stripped away at the federal level, and we need to be vigilant at the state level, we're ensuring that we're closing that loophole and making sure that all law enforcement is required to provide a warrant in order to receive our data. New Yorkers everywhere deserve to have their personal information protected, and as someone who is born and raised in Jackson Heights and has crossed paths with many of the folks who are standing here today that have been doing the work, especially around the most vulnerable and marginalized of us, immigrant working class New Yorkers, our Muslim brother and sister, our neighbors who have been at the risk of the most surveillance, we know that now is the time for New York to lead and to say that we are a state and a city that protects our vulnerable New Yorkers, that protects our immigrant neighbors, that curtails law enforcement because we know who is surveilled at the highest rates. And so with this suite of bills, we really hope that New York will not only take the lead on this, but that we'll really push ourselves into the 21st century and be proactive in our leadership, especially as technology is continuing to evolve. So I hope to do that work in the Senate, and I'm so proud and again so grateful for everyone standing here today for doing that work in the legislature, in the city, in the state, and I know that together we can get it done. So thank you all so much.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harvey Epstein, State Assembly Member in the 74th District. I'm happy my district overlaps with Senator Gonzalez in the Manhattan portion, and happy to be here to prime sponsor this bill. Let's be clear about the history of this country and this state, that we have surveilled people for decades because we didn't like their political opinions. We have followed immigrants. We have harassed New Yorkers. We have seriously detrimental impact on black and brown New Yorkers across our state. And our police and our law enforcement can get access to so much information. Your date of birth, your driver's license, various information, without any warrant, without any probable cause. And that ain't right. That is not the New York we believe in. That is not what we're fighting for. We need to change the law to prevent that from happening. Because there are abuses, we know, we see them. And changing this law is one step forward in closing those abuses. It is critical that New York takes the lead here. Personal privacy has been diminished over decades. We see it on the internet, you see it every time you go on Facebook or you want to Google something, that your privacy is diminished. But when the government does it, on the government's behalf, that's deeply problematic for every New Yorker, especially immigrant New Yorkers of color, and people who are the most vulnerable. So we stand here introducing this new bill together. I'm glad it's your first bill, so congratulations. Hopefully it's the first bill we pass as well. And together we will ensure that we get this done before the end of the legislative session. And one last thing about this whole package of bills. I really want to applaud my colleagues who have taken this on together to stop the abuse that we see. This is the only way we need to do it. We need to ensure comprehensively we stop the privacy that's being violated. Thank you.
So much. It's really an honor to be working with legislators who care so deeply about this issue. So thank you very much. And having this be your first bill, really worked hard. Next up, we have the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition, Murad Awadeh. I think everybody here probably knows and loves. We're so grateful for your work on New York for All, and we're really excited to hear you talk about it, and we're excited to support it. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I know it's almost lunchtime, but we can do better than that. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Murad Awadeh. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition. I'm pleased to join S.T.O.P today because surveillance has always been weaponized against immigrant and communities of color. In fact, at this moment, ICE and CBP are given free rein to terrorize immigrants using sensitive information shared by state and local officers to cruelly separate families. And that ain't right.
That ain't right.
That's why we're here to demand that our leaders in Albany pass the New York for All Act and put an end to this injustice. New York for All Act will keep New York families together and make our communities safer. This bill would prohibit local law enforcement and state agencies from colluding with ICE, CBP, to arrest and deport immigrants across New York. ICE and CBP are only concerned with advancing their racist and xenophobic agenda, not keeping our communities safe. New Yorkers deserve protection by our government, not being targeted and harassed. Data shows that crime is actually lower in places where officials do not divert time and resources to enforce hostile immigration policies. When ICE and CBP have access to information on people's immigration status, many are afraid to report a burglary or domestic violence, or fear that even calling emergency services would lead to deportation. The New York for All Act would protect immigrant communities across the state of New York by keeping families intact and restoring our basic rights to freedom. Our leaders must end this blatant and discriminatory policy of allowing the surveillance of immigrants, and by passing the New York for All Act is the first critical step New York State must take. It's time to ensure that our state remains a safe place for all who call it home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murad, for that speech, for the work you did on the bill, for organizing the event today. So happy to be working with you. One of the amazing things about this package is the great groups that we've been able to work with. Coming up, the next bill is a collaboration between a great group, Communities United for Police Reform, which a lot of us know and love, and a truly wonderful legislator, Assembly Member Jessica Gonzalez-Rojas. I'm always just so excited to work with you. It's hard to understand that this is only your second term, given how much you managed to accomplish for progressives across the state in your first term, and we can't wait for another.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, I'm so proud to be here to launch the Stop Surveillance package of bills, and I'm deeply proud to reintroduce the bill that would prohibit the government use of biometric data for surveillance. Now, we know that the software for facial recognition is literally racist. It is literally racist. It is 100 times more likely to misidentify a woman of color than a white man. And when someone's misidentified, they're often criminalized.
Right.
And that ain't right.
That ain't right.
So I am so proud to reintroduce this bill, to be part of this suite of package of bills. Senator Salazar will carry this with me in the Senate, and it's time that we address the system. It's broken, it's biased, and it's antithetical to democracy. So I'm proud to be part of this coalition. It's no mistake that we're here also with our immigrant brothers and sisters and siblings, that because criminal justice and racial justice and immigrant justice is one, and we need to stand together and we need to fight together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So next up, I'd like to introduce another partner organization that we're so happy to be working with, which is Legal Aid. Legal Aid is really in the trenches on a lot of these issues. They're the organization that sees the harms up front because it's their clients that are being affected by a lot of this. And so it's such a thrill to be able to partner with Legal Aid in an event like this. I'd like to introduce staff attorney from the DNA unit, Dave Pollack, and a staff attorney from the Digital Forensic Unit, Diane Ackerman, to talk about two extremely important bills in cutting down on the New York State surveillance state.
Thank you so much, David, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I want to speak briefly about two bills in this exciting package that deal with our genetic privacy. The first, with gratitude for Assemblymember Zinnerman, who's a sponsor, would ban rogue DNA databases like those at New York City's OCME. When the government captures our DNA and indexes it unlawfully, it is, in effect, creating a perpetual genetic lineup for some New Yorkers who may not even know it, and causing them to be a suspect in police investigations every single day. That's not only a violation of privacy, it's a violation of the law, which requires only individuals who have been convicted of certain offenses to put their DNA into a DNA index, and even then, only in the regulated New York State DNA database. Unregulated DNA databases, like those that currently exist outside of the law, increase the risk of wrongful prosecution and wrongful conviction for individual New Yorkers who've done nothing wrong, and it also erodes the support and trust of the community in the police. The second bill, sponsored by Senator Generis, would ban DNA phenotyping, which is an unregulated and unproven pseudoscience that David mentioned at the top that seeks to create composite images of potential suspects in a way that is blatantly racist and, again, lacks the scientific foundation. This bill would ban that deeply problematic practice and put an end to it. As with many of the other privacy and surveillance issues that are highlighted in this package, We cannot take chances with our genetic privacy. Thank you.
I also want to start by thanking all the advocates and lawmakers here today who are supporting each of the individual bills, as well as the entire package, creating a blueprint for privacy in New York State. As public defenders, we see the full arsenal of tools used against our clients' communities, and we also see the devastating consequences. We frequently see the use of facial recognition by law enforcement, and study after study has shown that facial recognition technology is unreliable, it is biased, it is racist. As recently as this month, another black man was arrested, falsely arrested, and incarcerated based on only a facial recognition match, 3 states away from the state where the crime occurred, in a state he had never stepped foot in. Dozens of other jurisdictions have already long acknowledged the dangers of this unreliable technology and moved swiftly to ban it. But here, there has been a failure to act in any meaningful way, and the failure to ban facial recognition has allowed its use to expand, to normalize, and to harm countless individuals. Geofence warrants also create digital dragnets that criminalize entire communities. In densely populated urban areas, these searches invade the privacy of thousands of people and make suspects of anyone who simply passed near a location. These searches are also a threat to the First Amendment rights of people, allowing law enforcement to track any device at a rally or a protest. The life-altering consequences of these are not theoretical. They have happened, and they will continue to happen. Proponents of the technologies, often the people who personally profit from their purchase and use, would like us to believe that they are objective and free from any human biases. But that is a myth. These tools do not operate in a vacuum. They rely on people. People who choose where to use them, how to use them, when to use them. As public defenders, we're often limited to seeking accountability in the form of court rulings on individual cases. But by then, the damage has been done. We are already looking at a criminal prosecution. It's time to ban the use of all of these technologies and to really safeguard the privacy rights of New York State. New York must become a surveillance sanctuary state.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Zinnerman, who has been a true champion of this DNA database bill, and we're so glad that you can be with us to talk a little bit more about it.
Great, thank you. This is a wonderful coalition, and I am proud to be here as the Assembly member for the 56th District, which is Bedford-Stuyvesant and Crown Heights, a mostly immigrant and Black and brown community. I am here, like you all today, just to simply uphold the law. The law already states that there should be one single database in New York State. Yet New York City has defied that law and has a rogue database that contains DNAs of children and people who have not been convicted of a crime. That is a crime, and we cannot allow that to continue. This bill simply would say that we would abolish that particular database and only use the one that is monitored by the state. The government is made of checks and balances. We need to make sure that if there's any agency that is collecting information or collecting data, DNA from us, that we know what they're doing, we know that they're abiding by the law and they're following procedures. We do not have that right now with the rogue database that New York City is holding, and so we need to do something about it. Listen, I am not anti-law enforcement, but the law enforcement has to abide by the law. This is not a bad CSI or Law and Order episode. People are literally breaking the law by inviting people to have a drink and then stealing their DNA. And without them ever having been convicted of a crime, using that and housing it, and we don't know how that's happening. So I want to thank S.T.O.P. I want to thank the Legal Aid Society for all the great work that you've done on this. And the New York Immigrant Coalition, you know that Black and brown people, like immigrant people, Muslim people are being targeted every day, disproportionately targeted. And if we let this stand, it will continue, that database will continue to grow. So thank you for all of your great work, and let's make sure that we pass this bill this year.
Here. Thank you so much, Assemblymember. Next that covers one of the creepiest forms of surveillance, which is drones. I think a lot of you have been at a protest and seen a drone overhead and been pretty unsettled about what that means and what's happening. And I'm just so thankful for Assemblymember Ron Kim, who is introducing a bill that would ban the police use of drones. So thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Albert. Is he still here? They left. Okay. And all my colleagues who have introduced the slew bills, stop the government surveillance once and for all against the people of New York. You just imagine if we spend all this money to protect and strengthen people's rights instead of taking people's rights away. It's actually much easier, much more profitable for the for-profit industry to monetize off of surveillance when we take people's rights away in the form of surveillance. And that's what's happening now. So I just came by to applaud everyone, legal aid, all the legal scholars behind me who put this legislation and my colleagues to get this bill done. My particular bill, which I'm reintroducing this year with Jessica Ramos, will ban the usage of drones. It's not unreasonable in cases of emergencies. They're allowed to use these drones, but when it comes to regular surveillance, when people are protesting or gathering, they should not be sacrificing our privacies. So I'm glad we can get this done, and we'll get it done this year. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember, for sponsoring this bill and for being a champion of progressive causes for so long. We are very appreciative. So the last bill we really want to focus on is potentially the most important because it's a bill on geofence warrants. Geofence warrants have been exploding in recent years, and the harms are quite concrete and are being felt by New Yorkers every day. So I'd like to introduce Senior Privacy and Technology Strategist for the New York Civil Liberties Union, Daniel Schwartz, to talk about work on that bill.
Thank you, David. I'm honored to join on behalf of the New York Civil Liberties Union to call for the passage of crucial bills to ensure that technologies are not used to circumvent our civil rights and civil liberties protections. We urge the legislature to pass the reverse warrant ban, the biometric surveillance ban, the rogue DNA database ban, and New York for all. Warrants are a central tool for law enforcement, but they need to be narrowly targeted, specific, and based on probable cause. Reverse location and keyword warrants do not meet this baseline standard. They request the disclosure of multiple people's private information simply because they were in a particular area during a specific time frame or entered a certain keyword into a search engine. They can place hundreds of thousands of unsuspecting and innocent people in the crosshairs of law enforcement, threatening their rights to be free from unreasonable government searches. Geofence warrants have led to false arrests, and they were even used at protests against police brutality, ensnaring protesters in Minnesota and Wisconsin. They are also becoming more ubiquitous. In response to calls from a nationwide coalition of privacy and civil liberties groups, including the organizations assembled here today, Google released information about geofence warrants from law enforcement across the country from 2018 to 2020. The report shows a staggering 12-fold increase over those 3 years, totaling close to 21,000 requests. Given the omnipresent role that digital technologies play in all our lives and the ever more detailed data trails tech companies are collecting, it's urgent that we ban these dragnet warrants. Senate Bill S.217 by Senator Myrie would do just that. Our participation in digital life should not automatically open us up to pervasive police spying. That's exactly why reverse warrant must be outlawed.
Thank you so much for partnering with the New York Civil Liberties Union on this bill and on the National American Civil Liberties Union to create a model bill that will hopefully be adopted across the country. Has been a true pleasure, and we're so glad to be working with you. Next up, I'd like to introduce New York City organizer for an organization that is so important, not just in New York, but across the whole world, Amnesty International. Please welcome S.T.O.P.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Atia, and I'm Amnesty International's New York organizer. I run our New York Ban the Scan Task Force, and I'm here today to represent my task force and support the work of the S.T.O.P Coalition and all the folks here today who took part in co-creating this anti-surveillance bill package. As a Muslim American growing up post 9/11, I was uncomfortably familiar with mass surveillance in this country. I saw how it was used to police, monitor, and punish my community simply for being Muslim. I witnessed how surveillance technology was used to misidentify and target us because we looked like the enemy. Rather than keep anyone safe, surveillance technology simply helps to scapegoat us and breed more fear and hate. It shouldn't take experiences like this to recognize that surveillance is a harmful, biased practice. And that's why I'm proud to be standing here now in support of removing these illegal and harmful practices from our New York community. We need to protect our immigrant communities, our Muslim communities, our Black and brown neighbors from mass surveillance. And we can do so by supporting legislation that regulates and prevents illegal uses of surveillance technology in our state. Legislation like the biometrics ban can ban facial recognition technology, which is so often used to stereotype and misidentify the features of Black and brown Americans. We have a duty to act, and we must act now. I invite you to support us in this work by joining our campaign, by taking a stand against mass surveillance, and supporting this legislation package. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia, for your work on this bill, for all the work that you do, for all the work that Amnesty does. I want to give a quick, this is quasi-stalling, we may have one more speaker on the way, but a quick overview of the 10 bills in the package before we call an end to this, and thank all the sponsors of the various bills. There's the Reverse Location and Reverse Keyword Search Prohibition Act, which is the ban on geofence warrants. Very thankful to NIFLU for their work on that, to Assemblymember Salages and Senator Myrie for sponsoring it. There's the Stop Online Police Fake Accounts and Keep Everyone Safe Act. This is a bill to ban fake social media profiles by law enforcement. This is sponsored by Assemblymember Mandani and Senator Clear. There's the unofficial DNA database ban, sponsored by Stephanie Zinnerman in the Assembly and Brad Hoylman in the Senate. And the DNA phenotyping ban, sponsored by Senator Janaris in the Senate. Both of those have been championed by Legal Aid, and we're very grateful. There's the New York for All Act, championed by the New York Immigration Coalition and sponsored by Assemblymember Reyes and Senator Gunardis. There's the biometrics ban, championed by Communities United for Police Reform, sponsored by Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas and Senator Salazar. There's the Modernize the Personal Privacy Protection Law Act, sponsored by Assemblymember Epstein and Senator Gonzalez. There is the Omni-Privacy Act, which protects privacy of folks using public transportation from surveillance via an Omni card or other cards, sponsored by Senator Fernandez. There's the Protect Our Privacy Act, which bans police drones, sponsored by Assemblymember Ron Kim and Senator Jessica Ramos. And there's the Cell Site Simulator ban, which bans the use of stingrays, devices that surveil people by tricking cell phones into thinking that they are cell phone towers and giving over information on your cell phone. These can be deployed at protests to intercept text messages and figure out people who are intended for the protest. They are inherently Fourth Amendment violations, but while the court is still waiting to act, our legislature must do so. So, unless the Assemblymember Salages has arrived, as I last noticed, then thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate your being here. We appreciate the support. Thank you so much to New York Immigration Coalition for all the organizing you've done and for helping us make this happen. So thank you all, and we hope you have a great afternoon.